Saludos. Hello, greetings. Welcome to another segment. Today it feels kind of like Monday, just we didn't have our segment yesterday, and that's why it feels like Monday. So, welcome to Tertuliando Cuarentena, gathering in quarantine space of accidentality and intentionality, where conversations happen, and we explore a series of topics together. Problematizing things and situations, and especially in these times of pandemic. So tonight we have a guest, as we usually do. Um, so joining us from Entiendo, I think from California. If not, she'll be able to correct any misinformation. But let's see if we can make this magic happen. There you go, Johanna.
Hola, ¿cómo
There
están?
we go,
Hola,
tremendo.
hello.
Joanna or Johanna?
Neither.
Neither, right? There you go.
Johanna.
Johanna Junker.
Junker.
Muy bien.
Decimos Junker en portugués, pero Junker está bueno porque no me gusta Junker.
No, I mean, okay, and I imagine that's how it's it
A lot
kind
of
of
people
is.
call me Junker.
Yeah, because that's how it's read in English.
Right.
So gracias, thank you for coming along and participating and entering into this dialogue, which I find quite intriguing and interesting, and I'm delighted to have you over and ask you some questions of things I find quite intriguing about some things you do, and pero a little bit about a little disclaimer. This talk might be a little bit of Spanglish, and
That's right.
so so I just want to make that apology beforehand. This commentary on me. So gracias. Thank you for coming along.
It's my pleasure. It's my
So
pleasure. It's good
so
to be
something I like to ask my guests as they join along
here.
is another disclaimer. I'm missing out all these things. I'm out of shape because I didn't have yesterday's talk. So then today I'm falling into time little by little. So let's see if I can get all the disclaimers out of the way so I don't interrupt you when you're answering questions. So if people joining, if you guys want to ask questions or make comments, you're completely free to do. It could be Spanish, it could be English. Portuguese also, like I'll bring it up, and then
Yeah.
and then and then Johanna will be able to approach it, and then we'll see how we go about it. As inclusive as inclusive as we can be. And so now, first question, first question for you. So
Oh,
how has it been for you navigating into this situation in the pandemia? Like how's it been for you entering into this year? I understand that you were sharing with me earlier in the year you weren't you went to you passed my home country in Puerto Rico, and you lived a little bit through the earthquakes, and little did we know what would be unfolding 2 months from that. So how has that transitional period been for you, Johanna? How has it been for you, in I guess in contrast to what you were doing before? Like what was your routine? What were you doing?
yeah.
And how did that affect that? And it's a personal question as to how does it affect you, but also how does it affect your profession, your everyday? And another thing is what are maybe your observations of this phenomenon in society? What things have you thought this thing has brought to the surface?
Okay.
Yeah.
Uh, Thank you again for the opportunity. It's wonderful to be here and to be in conversation with you and whoever is watching. Hello. I wish I could give you all hugs,
Uh,
virtual hugs from where I am right now. I am quarantining with my parents who live in Chicago right now.
pues mira.
Um, and I will be back in the Bay Area in a couple of weeks. So yes, like you said, I started 2020 in Puerto Rico, and I lived through the three earthquakes. We left right after the third earthquake hit, and I was talking to my friends who traveled with me. I said, we already survived everything that could have gone wrong with 2020. Little did we know
Yes.
that we would be living through a global pandemic and the uprisings and the ingovernability of, Brazil and the United States. I mean, the lack of really, tending to the communities and leading these two countries, both governments, I don't think are doing the greatest job at leading us all into this pandemic. So yes, it's been a constant recalibration, right? Like, of workspace, of relations, a lot of grief. I think we've been having to recalibrate our relationships, regenerate our relationships, the relationship that we have to self, to our homes, to our communities, finding ways to be connected while being apart physically. Understanding that the place that we used to come home to sleep, perhaps, has taken on a whole different role in our lives. We spend most of our days, in isolation. Those of us who are not going outside. Chicago has folks out and about in ways that I can't understand. There are lots of communities that are not practicing the social distance that we were doing in California. So it's been a lot of adjustment. The classes have gone online, and so we're rethinking our pedagogies, the ways in which we approach the classroom, the expectations that we set. I have noticed, and among myself and colleagues, that the virtual space of the classroom has sort of this obligation to become a space of a word. I'll use this word in Portuguese because I don't think there's a translation for it in English. A space of acolhimento, of regard, of exchange, of mutuality, of looking into one another's lives and context and situation, and whatever is coming to the surface of our bodies, that's incarnate in our bodies in some ways, with care, with regard, with mutuality, and with affection. And I think we took a lot of that for granted, right? So the spaces that we're able to come together and have this kind of conversation in which we're like intimating the world's different, right? To use Le Guin's words and language around this, has been a very important return to. I don't think it has been a shift necessarily. We're returning to that way of being in which we're being and becoming collectively, and with this tenderness, with care. I love the word of acolhimento. I've been thinking about this word a lot, and it has come up in through many of the conversations that I've had with friends and colleagues and student teachers. Every student is a teacher. And it seems to be that which I miss the most, right? Of like this ability to like touch one another, to embrace one another. Because I think this word in particular, lives and breathes in the embrace that we receive when the loads that we're carrying are just too much, when the experiences that we have are felt with, right? So it's sort of like a deep, very deep regard and honoring of all that we are and have gone through, a welcoming of sorts, acolhimento. Like I usually do this gesture when I talk about acolhimento. I'm like, acolhimento is this, when you bring people to like the center of you, your heart, and it's that kind of question that you ask those who you are in relationship with, for them to tell me or us about their despair, so we can tell them about ours, right? About mine. So it's a practice of offering of each other, of our gazes, our regard, and acolhimento to all of our relations. So I've been thinking a lot about that. And I've been thinking a lot about like reinventing intimacy and all of the things that have changed dramatically for us how do we sustain, relationships that have this dimension of intimacy while being devoid of touch, right? Like, how do we sustain joy? How do we set traps for empire and these extractive practices and productivity and one thing after another? How do we set traps for those, right? Yeah, so I don't know if I answered your question, but these are some of the things that have been on my mind, some of the shifts that I have seen. And I'll say the last thing, one of the things that emerged out of these times for me is this really profound necessity to be with my body and within my body, be rooted in the ground upon which I stand. And my body. And I've been practicing this breathing, praying meditation that I sort of came up with to deal with the anxieties and my mental health conditions that kind of, make reality just unbearable sometimes. And it involves really trying to bring to the surface of our bodies that which needs to be uttered, that most intimate thought, sensation that is within, and that kind of needs to come out, right? And when it does come out, and then there is a drawing practice that I like to engage with around that word or thought. So those are some of the things that, COVID-19, the uprisings around the world, and our condition, geopolitical condition, has sort of brought up for me.
Oye, one thing, la palabra acogimiento, that word acogimiento, ¿no? que asumo que esa es la traducción en español. I think that's the translation in Spanish. Yeah, it does have that. It does have the intentionality, invitation, inclusion. It's kind of like all included in that word, and maybe that's why you like it so much. I mean, I think it's such a beautiful word, and you saying that you kind of visualize it and tangibilize it through this sort of like action. I think of like a mother chick, kind of like,
yes, that's it,
covering,
that's exactly it,
covering her chicks, her little baby chickens. Y otra cosa. See, there's my ADD is going like, I forgot what was the thing, but I remember now. The meditation you do. I don't know if you have implemented it to a point where you can maybe exemplify it for others to incur and to practice it, or to share it. Because if you did, it would be really nice if you could maybe do a little sample at the end, for everyone, including me, to be able to find spaces of grounding ourselves and being aware how hard it is to live in the present. So hard. It's so hard.
Yes, it's very hard. It's a second by second kind of practice and exercise that we have to engage with.
For my ADD mind is like,
yeah. This has been such a generative practice that I've been invited several times to facilitate workshops, with different organizations. Where the premise, like sort of like the basis, the little seed for the workshop was around this practice of drawing, of actually breathing, being, and praying, like this meditation. So we breathe, we are, and then we pray, or we try to, sort of pull out of this experience that which needs to.
But don't do it yet. Don't do it yet. Yeah. I would like to do it at the end. I know it's just I would love to just give you that full space so you can just explain it and go into it as much as you feel free.
Let's reserve at least like 10 minutes for it at the end.
Sure.
Cool? Yeah.
Sure. Dale, super,
I,
super, super. I
yeah.
like that.
Perfect.
Okay. So, and please remind me if I totally forget.
Mm-hmm.
Or people watching, if you see us kind of engaging in that goodbye moment and forget about this, please remind us through a comment. I'm likely refer to forget. So, hold us accountable. Johanna, I like giving the space of recounting experiences that guests feel are formative in their lives, and I do it through this question of three shared experiences. It could be more, but at least three that you feel were transformative and cathartic in your life to form and to be the person you are right now. It could be very specific instances, traumas, whatever, but memories that you can remember and you can feel are shareable to to kind of accentuate on the power of storytelling too, and also kind of part of your journey. So if you could share like three experiences that you feel could be dating back as early as you were a little kid to recently as an hour ago. So siéntete en total libertad de compartir estas tres experiencias, three
Okay.
experiences.
Déjame ver. Hay una experiencia que hablo de ella con frecuencia. es, uh, es una experiencia que formed me in many ways, and it sort of encapsulates how I was raised. So let me see if I can organize my thoughts around this
Vale, vale.
first experience, then a thing.
And they don't have to be in chronological order. They can be zigzagging, kind of how life is, sort of.
Okay. So I'll start with the experience, and then I'll talk about a thing, and then I'll talk about a person, if that's all right.
Super, claro que sí. That's
So the
good.
first thing, like an experience that I think encapsulates that sort of like was the spark. I say like the holy spark, the holy electric current that sort of initiated and
The
put
short circuit.
yes, that short circuited me into this trajectory that I'm on. That's non-linear at all. It's, it has very interesting designs and directions and returns and advances, as it should, as one's life should. Was this experience that I had when I was very, very young. I was 5 years old, and I am the daughter of a pastor and a professor of liturgy and worship and an educator. My mom is also a professor, so I was born literally in the Methodist University of São Paulo, in São Bernardo do Campo. And at a particular occasion, Rubem Alves, who is one of my sort of my inspiration and thinker that I have thought with for the longest since I can remember, was at this university that my parents were still studying at. And my mom took me to a lecture when I was 5 years old, and she promised me that if I sat through the lecture, right, so this was an academic lecture, she would have found a way to have Rubem Alves autograph my very first book. I wish I had that book with me to show you, because the title of the book is How Happiness Was Born.
Oh,
And
wow.
sure enough, I sat through the lecture, and after the lecture was over, she took me to like the stage where he was. We stood in a line for a really long time, and I had my little book in hand, and he signed it, and he handed it back to me, and he said, "You have a beautiful name. Don't ever forget your dreams. Little girl, be sure to never forget your dreams, or to dream." It had whatever he said to me made an impression, and reminded me that dreams are things that we need to hold on to.
Mm-hmm.
And if we don't hold on to that capacity to dream, we are unable to invent futures that are worth living. And so that book encapsulates sort of what I think educators, I went on to become an educator, and I read his books, and I had this yearning to be able to write in ways that my writing would touch people's hearts, that would slide from the minds to the hearts. So that transformation and generosity and reciprocity and love and regard, all of those acolhimento would be felt by those who read me, right? And in exchange of mutuality, where I'm offering the best of myself, and you're receiving whatever I'm offering. So that experience was really formative too, because I held on to that book, and I didn't understand at 5, obviously, because I wasn't able to read the book, but I was able to look at the images, and the images told a very profound story. It showed me that images and the arts are one of the languages that we have to make sense of the reality of the things we're unable to name verbally. And through the visual language, I think we're able to incantate the world and intimate the world differently. So that book, that experience with that book, carrying that book, it was just very formative, right? Like a material thing that I could go back to.
Claro.
Yeah. Let's see. The second, I have a very profound relationship with plants. And this is due to the way in which my grandmothers shaped me as a human being. They had very intimate relationships with the plants. And one of these plants is girasol, the sunflower. I have this very strong connection with with the land, and with this plant in particular, because I didn't know this, but sunflowers, when they can't find the sun, they turn to one another to thrive.
I did not know this.
Yeah, I didn't either. And so we orient ourselves toward the divine light that each of us carry. And I think this, the girasol reminds me, the word girasol literally in Portuguese means that we twist and turn toward the sun. Girasol. Right? So there's like, and I tend to say that eu giro com teu sol. I turn myself toward your sun. And I always said that because it's a little playful, like a playful way to say the word girasol, giro com teu sol. It's like a little play.
That's beautiful, yeah.
But I didn't know until very recently, when I started studying the Congo Bantu notion of Kindezi through the teachings of Azangeri. She's a Brazilian scholar. And this philosophy of Kindezi is that, we're put here on this earth to light each other's light, like to incendiate each other, to set fire to our hearts and to our lives in the good way, right? In a positive way. And I think, so we have a situation that was very formative. I guess I'll tell you something that changed my research completely. So the third situation is something that changed my research very profoundly. I began the PhD in art and religion to study the work, the land art of the American Southwest. And I thought that I was going to, write this long dissertation about, aspects of the spiritual in the work of James Turrell, who's a land artist and whose work is very prominent in Arizona, in the US. And right before I entered the PhD, I attended a conference in Santa Fe. And the keynote speaker, Rina Swinzel, was an architect, a Pueblo architect from the Santa Clara Pueblo. And I explained to her my project. I talked to her after. I had the opportunity to talk to her for a little bit after after her keynote address. And I explained to her my project what I was hoping to do. She was really not excited about what I was setting out to do.
What a downer,
She
eh?
looked at me with a bunch of suspicion, and like I think in the back of her mind, she was thinking like, "What is this woman thinking?" Right? Like, why land art in the Southwest?
Yeah.
And her suspicion and the thing that she told me literally changed the direction. And it didn't change the direction of my research right away. I had to let that circulate my body. Like I had to integrate what I heard from her and
Imagine.
and the research that I
It's
did.
not a flattering thing to hear. So imagining,
Imagine. So here's what she said. She said, "Listen to the whispers of the land. It'll tell you where to go."
Oh, wow.
And so I did. So a year and a half into the research, I, flew to the Southwest, rented a car, and started to, it took a couple different trips, but I had to really put my body in motion in those places to understand how the insidious ways in which this colonial reminiscence of relating to the land permeated this movement, and how there were stories that had been strategically erased and forgotten. And that was the story that I set out to write, which was the story of Indigenous artists, contemporary Indigenous artists of the Americas, specifically around that area. And one of the artists that I came across, Nora Humors, who's also a Santa Clara Pueblo artist, her work is phenomenal. She does earthworks as well. And I was sitting at one of the archives, just, visiting her entire corpus of work. And as I was exiting, I spent like an entire week at this archive in Arizona. The head librarian came to me and gave me a gift. And this gift was a poem that she had written called "This Vessel." It's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful poem about how these containers, art libraries, archives, are containers of ancestral nutrients that keep the stuff of our dreams alive.
Oh, wow.
And as I was heading out of the archives, his assistant thought I was stealing this artwork, right, from the archive.
How did he
Where are you going with this?
How do you arrive to that conclusion? Did you physically remove things that you were not supposed to, or?
No, the guy, the head librarian had gifted me this, right? And she thought that I was walking out with something that belonged to the archive.
Oh, okay, claro. Yeah, that is.
No, I'm not stealing anything. So she went. I was like, you can go and talk to your boss. He just gave. This was a really generous gift, a gesture that he extended to me, a gift that he extended. So she went back, talked to him. She came back, and she was so
Embarrassed.
Right, to have
accuse you for a thief, yeah.
Acted, from the top of her privileges in the way that she did with me. And then she was like, as a token of like, of remorse, I guess, she handed me a little catalog. And she said, "This catalog is from my favorite exhibition here that the museum has ever had. It's 3 generations of women artists. So you have, grandmothers, mothers, and daughters."
Wow.
And to my surprise, this is 5 years after I had met Rena in that conference. I opened the catalog, and the person who is writing the preface, the introduction to the exhibition, is Rena Swintel. I almost dropped the catalog on the ground, and I said, "Why is Rena the author of the introduction to this? What's happening?" And then she said, "Well, aren't you researching about Nora?" And I said, "Yes. that's, I spent the whole week here in her archives. And then she said, Rena is her sister. They're sisters.
Makes the world even smaller, eh?
And in that moment, I realized that, there is a lot of circularity. And if we listen to the whispers of the land, our intuition of the divine, we're bound to end up in the right places at the right time.
Claro, having those aha moments, even if you're mistaken for a thief for
Then
a
that and
brief
that and
amount of
that
time.
was even if you're mistaken for a thief, that was to me, I hadn't started writing my dissertation at that point, but when that happened, I understood that I had made the right decision to listen to her wisdom
Claro.
and to shift the research. So,
Claro. I mean, and it seems to me, I mean, from what I gather in your words, that she had, good intention with what she told you, and
oh yes.
it's good to have that discernment
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
to discern those voices and mark out which ones are coming in from a good place and which ones are coming in from jealousy or whatnot. There could be anything. So it's good to have that sensibility. You mentioned your initiation with, I guess maybe it could be with the academia, dating back as to when you're an early kid, and maybe a commentary on your determination of sitting through a whole conference. I don't know if I would even be able to do that today.
I'm probably very entertained with something that was
Funcionó. It
that
worked. It worked
adults were
wonders.
having.
It worked wonders. But I mean, it plays into the, I mean, the continuity of life. I know it sounds kind of like self-explanatory, but how things, it's
Are
all,
circular. There's a
yeah, lo que
circularity
dijiste,
to
eso
it.
mismo, yeah, that thing, like it's all quite connected,
Mhm.
and I think having the willingness to be able to interpret it as such, because it's kind of like you were saying, like listening to the land, giving your ear the opportunity, because the land could be talking to you every second of the day, but if you're not
It is.
giving yourself the opportunity, then it's going to be like oído sordo. You're not going to be able to hear. And I think that speaks us to, you know interconnectivity with others. Are you listening to others as well?
Exactly.
Not just
Exactly.
hearing. There's noises every time, but like
Attuning, right?
tuning into that.
To
The
yourself, yeah.
the second experience, I want to kind of pause into that one. I find it, you didn't expand so much on it, but you did talk about los girasoles, which I did not. I mean, we have so many words that are compound words, and since we're just the familiarity of them, we don't stop and listen. In Germany, I lived 4 years in Germany. Most German words, I mean, there's a good amount of German words that are compound words, because what they do is they pile words next to each other. That's why sometimes in the German language you have words that have like 17 letters altogether,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
it's easier to see there. But in nuestra cotidianidad, in our routine, we have so many words that are compound, and there you have such deeper meanings.
And
Girasole is such
mhm.
a beautiful. I had not even stopped to think about it. The fact that they're turning to the sun, and I thought of the word namaste when
Mhm.
you were saying that, like recognizing that, maybe that glamour, that brightness in the other,
Mhm.
recognizing the deity, the illumination, the divine in the other. The connection, you talked about your ancestors, your grandmothers, right?
Mhm.
Y lo que te enseñaron, with the plants. Do you have this experience as to, dating back to where you were a little kid, and you were like the appreciation you had of observing them, or did you have moments with them that they kind of discipled you into it, or is this more of a visual art of appreciation that you saw and how they engaged with, with the nature?
Mhm. So I I learned a lot of the ethic, aesthetic, political ways in which I sort of see myself inhabiting today with them, actually. So like the kitchen for my grandmother was a place where like this alchemy, my paternal grandmother, where alchemy happened, right? Like where things that she had grown in her backyard, the fruits that grew in trees were transformed. They were these ingredients, these live ingredients that were transformed into nourishment, right?
Mm-hmm.
And wholesomeness. So by cooking, by talking, by being around her kitchen, we were genuinely creating a new language of love and affection, right? She gathered folks around her table. She infused their lives with this spiritual alchemy. And I think for my maternal grandmother, she lived with us for a really long time, growing up, and we always had visitors at our homes. My parents worked a lot. They were, at the university most of the time, and come the weekends, we were, immersed in like church life. We grew up Methodist, and so my maternal grandmother who lived with us, she gathered people around our home. Like our home was a home where people came to sort of find rest, to find acolhimento, to find that kind of acolhimento, because she would listen to their stories, and would pray with them, right? Um, would sort of pray over those who were so tired, who were going through so much in life and had nowhere to turn to for that kind of intimate bond. So, from one grandmother, there is like this gathering of more than humans sort of communities with, the food, with the plants. She always had this like potion that she prepared with a bunch of herbs. And if anything was going wrong, if you caught a cold, or she would bathe you in that. It's like an infusion
Mm-hmm.
of sorts, right? Very intimate knowledge of this vital energy that plants have to heal us, right? And that she knew that plants needed to be in relationship, like that we as human beings needed to be in relationship with the plants, and the plants would only thrive in her space if they were tended to, if they were talked to, if they were cared for. And so that sort of over transbordó. I don't know how to say that in English. It kind of overflows um, from her life into the community, and then on the side of my maternal grandmother, that sort of ethic, aesthetic, political sort of being in the world comes through tending to the relationships, the human relationships. So if we were experiencing physical pain on one side, or emotional pain, or spiritual pain on the other side, I had this combination of two very strong women who taught me some of the most important lessons that I've learned.
Vale.
Yeah.
And no sé, la cotidianidad, no, the that to which we are used to.
Yeah.
It's I mean, it's all part of the human experience because we have our routines and whatnot. But I think the danger of our routines is that we allow things to lose meaning, no. And then also
Right.
there's these pre-established notions um, that which you I guess are familiar with, and you are I guess are no longer to hold any reverence to,
Right.
because you're so familiar to it. And
You
and
know,
and,
and
and
I went on this journey, like very deep journey into academia, to find out that like there are some things that were held, a lot of wisdom that was held within the words that they uttered, that really maintained the vital force in me alive, right? They vivified me,
claro.
right? Yeah.
Claro. And it's so important to retake that. And that's where storytelling, that's what passing,
And
passing traditions.
yes,
It's
and the storytelling, like that's the spiritual activism in my
see?
in I mean, this is not my term, this is Ansaldua's term, but thinking through this sort of the quotidian, the everydayness, the accessibility of these, like girasol. There's so much wisdom contained in the ways in which that flower was named, right?
Yeah.
There is this spiritual activism, and there's power in the storytelling, and this spiritual activism is only activated through these stories that get passed on. um, so yeah, it's how these memories, they resist and they set traps to soterramento. Is there a word for, does that word ring a bell in Spanish?
Say it again.
Soterramento, soterrar.
Sí, soterrar. Yeah, 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 yeah. Is that's kind of like the opposite of enterrar, no?
So
Enterrar is to dig in. This is soterrar is to bring something out. Is that what you mean? Bring something
um,
out to the surface?
so no, so soterramento is something that's called that's caused. Um, it's the process by which something is covered by forceful movement. So
Okay.
like that movement can be caused by like earth or human induced phenomenon, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I write about this in my dissertation, my PhD dissertation, like, because this idea of soterramento is like exactly what colonial forces have done. They have soterrado our store. They soterraron our stories, like mudslides cause soterramento,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
earthquakes
yeah.
cause soterramento, hurricanes, erosions, eruptions, implosions, blasting to clear land for construction or artworks cause
Hmm.
soterramento,
And
right?
the consequence of that is to basically cover up, to basically invisibilize.
Exactly. And so the stories, they maintain these memories alive, right?
Hmm.
They maintain these this present, this absence present, right? And it's interesting if we think about the word sotejar, because even in that word, there is phenomenal, profound wisdom, because it's composed by the word so and the word terra. And if one is said to be so, one is alone, right? And terra means both land and earth in Portuguese. It's so buried within there's a buried wisdom within soterrar that recalls these verbs that evoke a sense of loneliness and a sense of um, terra, right? Annihilation, trapping, hiding, submerging, all of those things are there with the soul. Uh,
Mira, Johanna, I'm curious. I mean, you've been in the U.S. I guess we can say the diaspora, no, for what, like a decade
yeah,
now?
that's it.
Okay,
Mhm.
so you've been here for, I mean, a decade is a good amount of time, and also within the, as an adult,
Mhm.
that I guess you're more aware, or you could be more aware. It doesn't mean that if you're younger you're not, but you could be more aware of things that are going on, and specifically within this last decade, there's many, 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 many different things that have gone on.
Mhm.
So, how has 10 years living in the U.S. as a brasileña,
Mhm.
Latinoamericana, mujer? How has that shaped, your understanding of social justice? How has that shaped your understanding of what you wanted to, what you wanted to practice in your life, like as to the your university career, like, how have those things kind of put that puzzle into place?
It's still a puzzle.
Sí,
There's
sí,
no
sí,
like,
no está terminado, it's not finished, but how is it maybe put into a place that maybe you can kind of see a little bit clearer
yeah.
for
So
moments?
yeah, I think I find myself in this place of Neplanta, right, the whole time.
Mm. I like that you
And
say that word because it
yeah, And I feel like ane plantera, right? Like I'm making passages between worlds all the time. And part of what one of the reasons I love this word that Ansalua uses so much, right? Like ne planteras, we're those who are able to see beyond what's visible, hear beyond what's audible, and are not afraid to have a tongue of fire. And so I think I have sharpened my tongue in these last 10 years. I have grown into a sense of groundedness, in which I know, not only think anymore, but I know that the knowings of the people who have come before me, the knowings of the land that was my first home, that homeland, are important. So we have to, as we say in Portuguese, sulear our perspectives. The process of decolonizing and sort of fighting against these extractivist practices of neoliberalism and late stage capitalism and empire is like to push with force. And not to be afraid to have a tongue of fire. So I feel myself like not inhabiting the ivory tower in some ways. Like I describe myself as a popular educator. If institutions come to their ruin, I know that my vocation will be intact because I am invested in an education that is emancipatory, that it is for transformation, that it is for liberation, for that stands or not, stand, can sit, roll, and play, that we're able to find the sound of the genuine, as Thurman puts it, within us and around us, right? So yes, I've been thinking a lot about what it means. I've very recently received, permission, authorization from the government to stay in the U.S. And only 2 years ago, I saw myself, oh my goodness, I am an immigrant, right? Like I'm not going back, in the near future, like, and when my PhD program was over was when I thought I was going back to Brazil. And so I've been having to get rid of some of the identities that were kind of, layers of identity that were kind of like stuck to me. I had to undo them and to think with this question that you just posed about what it means to be in the diaspora here. So I feel like the way in which I've been able to do that is through a lot of pus and sweat and tears and laughter and joy and communities of accountability and family and friends and that, do that thing that Ansaldúa says that, we're committed to creating with our eyes like painters, with our ears like musicians, as truth sayers who will not let sort of the pen or the ink in our pen coagulate, right? Like we are going to continue to work and be implicated in lighting our suns, of like girar com os nossos sóis. Yeah.
Do you see the experience of like, being away from home or being away from one's home country? I mean, there's obviously constructs, I talked to a number of friends. I have a good Cuban friend who I met in Germany, and he's like, I've gotten to know home here in Germany through the story of immigrants. I've gotten to, as I've been engaging with him about, like the feeling of belonging, the feeling of nationality, and not for him, not him trying to be dismissive, but he's like, there's a lot of constructs, and I understand them, they're necessary, but there's a lot of constructs that could be limiting, in one's in one's attempt to relating with with one another. Or he says, at least they were to me, as I start meeting Africans, immigrants in Alemania and Germany. He told me about that experience as a Cuban, how he related with them. But also, there's a clear, there's a clear sense of patriotism, or a sense of belonging that one has at one's land, because it's not just one, it's not just a flag, it's sounds, it's smells, it's tastes, and there's a sense of nostalgia, so
You
you
know,
know
yeah.
I want, no, te dejo, pero quiero hacer esta pregunta rápido. In that nostalgia that I assume you feel at times of those smells, of those tastes, how how do you experience that nostalgia in a, perhaps, and I'm assuming, in a redemptive way, where maybe you don't get sucked into it and find yourself in helplessness, but maybe transform that nostalgia. And I say I'm making the assumptions because you've been there for 10 years, and I assume that you must have had some feelings of nostalgia for Brazil, for tu casa, for everything, for all those things. And if so, if not, then you don't have to answer it. But if so, how have you, if you have, see, I make questions based on assumptions. How have you adjusted that nostalgia, or redeemed that nostalgia, or transform, or turned it into a transformative thing? Or, because talking about living in the present, there is the nostalgia, for the nostalgia which takes us, visits to the past. How can you maybe take that into the present and transform it without maybe denying it? This is a question coming from me, like totally for me, in the wrestling of, how do I get to that place of being in the United States, which I don't like living here, and redeeming that into a present to present moment. If you understood that very extended, incongruent to sense question, you're free to answer,
Mhm.
and maybe give your 2 cents into that.
Yeah, we have a word in Portuguese, saudade, for nostalgia. It's this,
Saudade.
saudade. Yeah. It's sort of like a connection between two lonelinesses in a ways,
Mm-hmm.
that we make an absence palpably present, right? That which is physically inaccessible right now.
Exacto. Yeah.
And then we archive our desires, our hungers, our most intimate longings, um, within this, word that saudade, this notion that saudade sort of encapsulates. Um, and you can only have saudade for that which you love deeply,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that, has made a very profound impression in you. So, um, I, I, it's interesting because when I go back to Brazil, I go often to Brazil, and I don't, I don't think I'm one of those people who will stay here in the United States for forever or for a long time. The land calls me back all the time, back to Brazil. So I
Mm-hmm.
like, it lives and breathes and like moves through me. And when I go to Brazil, I sense this, like the familiarity of the smell, of the humidity, of the food, of the troca de olhar, the exchange of gazes at the airport. As soon as I arrive, it lets me know that it's home. Brazil is undergoing and has been undergoing so much, and I was born into the Brazilian dictatorship. Life has not been easy there, for me, as it hasn't been here. But I'm able to sort of look from a distance and I'm able to connect in deeper ways. If that, I know that makes no sense.
It does. It
That,
makes a lot of sense.
across the hemisphere here, down south. And I think being away there's this beautiful book by Paulo Freire, The Pedagogy of the Heart, in which he talks about, he's writing from exile, I think. Part of his book was written in exile, and then it was later published by Nita Freire. I have to check this information.
No,
Don't me
go
on this.
on. Estoy interesado.
Yeah, but it's a beautiful book, and I think it's written. Part of it is written either in exile or he's remembering exile, and he's saying that it was when he was exiled that he was able to make an archaeology of his veins, and so I think the United States has been able to provide that for me, a space to sort of look back, and reposition, recalibrate my gaze toward Brazil and my passion too.
Que eso es algo que eso es algo que usualmente pasa, ¿no?
Mhm,
Being away,
mhm,
being away, which is also another way of saying the lack of.
mhm, mhm. There's something faltante, something that's absent, right? And that's a way of thinking of saudade. Like there's a part of your body that's no longer there, but that like is this constant like remembering, like a remembrance of something that used to be there and it's not there um, anymore. So yeah.
Mira, no, tremendo. I wasn't expecting a particular answer because it wasn't a particular question. It was a
Mhm,
mess up of a question, as
mhm.
many of my questions are. I'm not being self-deprecating. I'm completely in terms with that. I understand it and I embrace it.
Yes.
that's how
One is
that's how they come out.
beautiful. Yeah.
It's not me like like hating on myself. No, I love it. I love that those questions come out like that, and I'm at ease with
And
that.
look, it's 7 p.m. We forgot. It's almost 8, I mean.
Pues mira, ¿quieres hacer como que te tenía como una o dos preguntas? Dime tú cómo estás con el tiempo. Sí.
I'm good. Yeah, I can stay for answer a couple questions.
No. Yo diría que son
And we
como.
can do the exercise if
Sí,
you
sí,
would like.
dame, vamos a hacerlo. Está bien si cerramos a las y 15.
Yeah,
A
perfect.
las y 15. O sea, 5 minutos más. Y entonces hacer el ejercicio cuando sean ya las y 5.
Okay.
¿Está bien? Está bien. En última instancia, I wanted to maybe get a little bit of your input as to what has been the learning curve and the learning experience of your, like, basically your latest research and your dissertation. No, you walked us a little tiny bit through it. No, pero qué cosa, like in particularly in the in your observations of land art or your discoveries through it, what has that, what has that been of a lesson to you, qué cosas quizás te sorprendieron that you did not know, that you found through it en ese research que hiciste, ¿no? Land art for me is I know a little tiny bit about it, ¿no? Quizás hablen un poco de eso, ¿no? Why you grew interested in that particular expression of art,
Mhm.
and then those ideas of wrestling with colonialism and the expression of land art into that.
Well, that's a conversation that's much broader than
Sí, me imagino. O sea, si puede hacer un
but
breve
yeah,
resumen, bien breve,
I
pues.
think the biggest learning, I suppose, like the biggest finding of from this research is that memories can undergo soterramento as can histories, right? And part of what is soterrado, what's sort of like hidden
Ujú.
within this art movement in the Southwest of the United States are many, many, many stories, indigenous struggles for land protection and for their livelihood. And so that is an ecocidal practices, to be very honest. So part of my work with the dissertation and that particular research, I'm doing a lot of research around Yorubantu cosmovisions right now, and pedagogies, and this idea of what it means to develop relationships of intimacy within the urgencies of our times. So my work is a little like my work with the land art movement, and the work that I started with the dissertation is a little bit on pause, because I defended it and I needed a little bit of time away from it.
Entendible.
But so I've in digging through whatever histories and memories and bodies literally that were soterrado in the land of the Southwest, I came across a lot of soterramento effects, manipulation, suppression, silencing that worked for particular political agendas, and that tempered not only with the retelling but also the interpretation of history, and compromised our ability to sort of present to future generations, how it is that we're able to make life-affirming choices, and actions that protect life, right? So I came across a lot of like data and a recounting of like how mining companies have been specialists in soterramento from the public eye. So land art was sort of like, because I was lured and seduced by it, by the beauty of the land art, I wasn't necessarily aware of how much privilege, how they encapsulate, so some of the most lethal ways of being of the American society. So that this soterramento, whatever I did with the dissertation, was an attempt to write, that history, and to offer a counter history, right? In which, not only do I show the slow violence that was done to the land and to the people of that land, but I also sort of put indigenous voices and art making as central in this process.
Which is a continuation of every other kind of aspect that colonization has in effect. It's just that being aware of it is I think it holds quite urgency. So we realize that it's not just little sectors in society that have been, let's say, polluted, or have been like disregarded or re-narrated to fit a certain narration. So
yeah, and I think if I want to borrow Dan Million's work, she has a phrase that's absolutely beautiful. She says that the work that we do, the ways in which we live in the world. She wrote an article that I think is called "We Are the Land. The Land is Us: Indigenous Land, Lives, and Embodied Ecologies." I think something like that. She says that our ways of being, our production, whatever it is that we create, it needs to reflect where our care, they need to activate our care for what is visceral. So I think this research is an activation of what is visceral in me, which is this impetus to relate to the earth, to each other, as interdependent, as interrelated, connected to traditional territories, to traditional wisdom and knowledge, philosophy, to Amerindian ways of being and becoming, which are reciprocal, right? Which are mutual, that happen with that concept and that philosophy of Konakui, the Quechuan philosophy, where I come into situations offering the best of myself in mutuality and with affection. So that's
está bueno. No,
yeah.
Cuando un último pensamiento antes de que pasarte la parte. It's funny, pasarte la parte. I feel like I'm in a church service. Hace tiempo. Entonces, so anyone whomever is interested in finding out a little bit more about the things you do you have anything like a, una página o algo que puedas compartir,
Yeah, my website is currently undergoing because like
construction.
remodeling. You can I have written for this blog that's on my website. It's really easy, johannajunker.com. There's a blog section on the poetics of resistance. I read a little bit about the work that I do there, and I'm supposed to, keep it up to date, which is not, but that's a project for August.
Hence the disclaimer.
Yes.
Nada, ponerlo aquí por si la gente
Yeah.
quiere.
And then if you follow me on Instagram, I tend to share a lot of these, emerging thoughts via the posts or the art that I make there.
So there you go. So you can find
My
her stuff on her Instagram and also her site. So at the beginning, those who weren't here at the beginning, Johanna was sharing that she does this exercise, um, which I guess interjects her spirituality and also the fact that we're trying to live in the present and trying to reground ourselves. And I told her if she could share that practice with us. Within all my skepticism as an agnostic atheist, I do still recognize that there is an importance in trying to be present, and there is an importance in tradition making as well. Tradition making, special transcendental tradition making. So the floor is yours, my friend. And
okay, so if you want to partake in this experience with me, you will need. I don't have it. I myself don't have the.
Muy bien. That's a great way to start. But that just speaks as to that Johanna didn't know. I put her on the spot. This is a commentary on me.
This is a beautiful gambiaja, is what we do.
There you go.
Improvising.
Estamos en el perfecto espíritu, entonces.
Right. Do you know what gambiaja means?
Ni puta idea.
I don't even. It's like you find a little way out of no way.
Pues there you go. Ya lo sé. Aprendí algo nuevo hoy.
But with a lot of creativity, you solve issues for things that you would need professional help with.
Ahí está. Yes, for the moment.
When you steal someone's internet, like you do a lot of gambiajas in Brazil. So
hence, this serves no connectedness to the story about people confusing you for a thief.
Oh yeah, there you go.
There's this is nothing to do with that. Anyway,
so
let
me give everyone a little bit of a background. So this was a practice, a meditation that I started during COVID-19 because my anxiety and my bipolar cycling was just through the roof, and I needed to be back in my body. So I started doing these practices. You'll need a marker. I found a marker and a piece of paper.
Could it be just a regular pen?
Yeah, it can be whatever you have to write with, and a piece of paper. And I'll take you through the meditation, okay? And I call it a breathing, a being, and a praying meditation. And you can substitute the word pray for whatever, be with, think with.
What do you call it again, so I can just put it here as a header?
Breathing, being, praying meditation.
Okay.
I'll write it too, so you can have it right there. Okay. So
I'm gonna put praying in quotation marks in case people don't relate with it.
Perfect. That's what I was saying. You can substitute that word for whatever resonates and feels legitimate. So I'm going to take you through the process, okay?
Dale.
Let me know when we're ready.
Yo estoy listo, pero no sé si la gente está lista. La gente asumimos que está lista.
¿Están listos? ¿Están listos y listas y listes? Okay. All right. So here it goes. Take a deep breath. Exhale. Take another deep breath. And exhale. Take another deep breath, and as you exhale, Identify a word, a phrase that crystallizes a thought or a sensation that you are experiencing and that needs to come to the surface of your skin, into your awareness, into your mind's eye. Once you have that word, I invite you to write that word at the center of your page. And you will breathe into this word deeply and slowly. And by trusting the movement of your hand, trusting the movement that your hands want to make, where your hands want to take you, and what your hands want to reveal to you, you will begin to draw lines around this word. So I have my, you see, my word Girasol. Okay.
Mine is desperation, by the way.
So breathe into that word, okay? And draw one line. As you breathe in, you're going to draw one line from one end of the page onto the other or around the word. But it has, your line has to be sustained with this breath in, right? With this inhale. And then you will breathe out and draw another line. So I'll show you how mine is going. You breathe in, and then you breathe out. And then you do this, breathing in and out, filling the pages or the page that you have in front of you with lines and breath. This is how mine is kind of looking right now.
So it's one line per each inhale or exhale. Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Like one motion,
One motion.
and then once that chapter of inhale, exhale closes, then with the other one, another line and another motion.
Another motion.
Vale. Voy bien entonces.
Take a few seconds to draw and breathe and note how your body is responding to this breathing, this drawing, this being meditation. And after you've been drawing for a little while, my invitation to you is to engage with this word and with the sensations that are coming up for you in this contemplative embodied exercise, and do a bit of noting and also a bit of writing about what has come up for you as you drew the lines, as you meditated and noted what the word is sort of stirring in your body and you. Sometimes the word for me, as I've done this exercise over and over and over again, has become a reflection of how I'm sensing and naming my most urgent needs, right? The desires of my spirit, or what a student of mine has taught me as a body prayer or a body meditation. And if you want to share what they look like, I'll share mine in a bit. But I invite you to, after the live is over, to do a little bit of journaling. most of my profound perceptions of how my body is stable or not so stable have come from engaging with these exercises and this noting, this journaling. I think my word is a desire for all of us during these times to turn with each other's sun, to light each other's sun.
Mine is pausing.
Here we go. Here's mine. Ta-da!
Aquí el mío.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Ay, qué linda eres. So in which particular moments do you find yourself doing this more often than not?
When things get crazy, when my mind is just going like, cycling is what those who are familiar with the bipolar condition know. So you go from like euphoria to like I can't do anything, and then euphoria and I can't do anything. um, and like your brain just cycles. So I stop everything that I'm doing, and sometimes I've had to. I think exiting like meetings, turning off my camera, and doing this while also paying attention. Just because Zoom exhaustion is real, and it's
Claro,
okay.
claro que sí.
And
Claro.
I think at the beginning of the pandemic, everyone thought, that was the new normal, and we were, required or expected even to be present in ways that we weren't really processing all the changes, all the losses, all the craziness, and all the ways in which there is no going back to normal.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't think we allowed ourselves to like really be with that
To
heaviness.
debrief.
I was doing this a lot more, but it's become part of my spiritual practice actually. So I'm doing it pretty regularly, and then but like I tend to like write more, journal more when there is conflict, internal conflict, the uprisings. I was part of, protesting and all of that. And this was, my mind just needed to like recycle some things and process some things. And I think I found I had insights because of where my hands took me that were my body trying to talk to my mind in ways that I wasn't quite ready for. And this was a sort of an easing into acknowledging the urgent needs of my body that I typically forgot to tend to, that I abandoned myself with.
Claro,
So,
claro.
yes.
So, Johanna, gracias por compartir. En verdad que me he disfrutado esta tertulia. I've had a good time and learned many things. And every one of you who has been, passing by, who has been here from the beginning, who has probably put this to practice, maybe this is something that could be quite useful.
Yeah.
In times as this, it's good to keep each other accountable in a good way. Not in a metric manner where we find ways to judge ourselves, but like to see how we are doing genuinely. And this is a great way that we ourselves can find how we are doing and take those moments of pausing. And if we're feeling like we need to be girasoles and turn towards each other to remember that we are emanating lights and in moments where it doesn't seem like it. So, gracias.
Muchísimas gracias a todos y todas y todes. Thank you everyone for spending some time with us. I wish you all groundedness and wholeness and affection and joy and laughter in the rest of your week. Thank you so much, Angel, for this beautiful conversation. I enjoyed
Vale, vale, no, igual acá hay gente, siempre termino, I always finish with Walter Mercado's words, mucha paz y mucho amor. Y nos vemos en la próxima mañana, a ver, si nos vemos, si no, la próxima vez que nos veamos.